Introducing Tall Tales with Senator Bob Klitzkie.
Hi, I'm Bob.
Purveyor of truth and justice.
Well, hold on. That's a bit over the top, isn't it? I just want to tell the Points International radio listening audience and Tall Tales buffs all over the world to take heart. I'm back. Tall Tales airs afternoons at 4 right here on The Point. Ray says, set your radio to 93.3 FM and forget it. You needn't touch it again.
The Point is KUSG, Hagåtña, Guam, 93.3 FM and 104.3 HD3.
On to Ankara. I'm Jack Callahan, Fox News. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo has left Saudi Arabia with a promise they'll get to the bottom of the disappearance of journalist Jamal Khashoggi.
I said it would be a thorough, complete, and transparent investigation. We'll all see the results of that. They made a commitment that they would show the entire world the results of their investigation. They also indicated they would get this done quickly.
And Secretary Pompeo says the Saudis have promised to hold anyone involved accountable, up to and including members of the Saudi royal family. Next up, meetings with government leaders in Turkey who say they have recordings that prove Khashoggi was tortured and killed in the Saudi consulate in Istanbul. Pastor Andrew Brunson now sharing details of his arrest on what he says were trumped-up terror charges in Turkey.
Telling Fox's Sean Hannity that after he was taken into custody, he was in a Turkish prison cell designed for 8 people, but it was filled with 20 other prisoners.
For part of that time, it was a very crowded cell, and part of the time I was also in isolation, so it was a very difficult time.
Brunson also saying there was another reason he felt isolated.
It was very difficult to be the only Christian among them.
Brunson says he's probably one of the most hated men in Turkey after being accused of being the reason for Turkey's economic problems because of sanctions imposed against the country by the Trump administration.
Fox's Jill Nato. Brunson was freed Friday, returned to the U.S. on Saturday. They lit up the early morning skies along Florida's Space Coast early Wednesday. The United Launch Alliance blasting an Atlas V rocket from Cape Canaveral, boosting an Air Force satellite into space designed to become part of a network to provide secure communications for the military. That sound you heard late Tuesday night as they announced the winning numbers in the $667 million Mega Millions jackpot. Millions of tickets sold. Not a single winner among them. Friday's estimated jackpot, $868 million. This is Fox News.
The problem isn't just not being able to hear or understand, or having to tell people to speak louder. Sometimes the frustration is having to repeat yourself too many times, or speaking so loud you're almost shouting. At Guam Hearing Doctors, we understand that hearing problems affect both sides. One of our goals is to help your hearing for those around you. Call us at 989-TEST to learn more.
One of the longest-running primary care clinics on Guam, the FHP Health Center, has been your convenient one-stop healthcare clinic for you and your family for many generations. FHP's highly trained and well-known medical, dental, and vision providers and their friendly clinical support team are here, ready to take care of you. In addition to the excellent care, FHP offers a full-service pharmacy, laboratory, radiology, and specialty care center in one location. FHP Health Center, our island, your clinic. Most insurance accepted, including Netcare, Aetna, and TRICARE.
3 weeks before the midterms, a debate Tuesday night between U.S. Senate candidates in Texas. Democrat challenger Beto O'Rourke invoking an old nickname for his opponent, incumbent Senator Ted Cruz.
Senator Cruz is not going to be honest with you. He's going to make up positions and votes that I've never held or have ever taken. He's dishonest. That's why the president called him Lying Ted.
Senator Cruz countering that he is in a position to get things done for Texas.
I'm able to work with President Trump and make the case to President Trump, and we have seen, for example, the president has negotiated a new NAFTA, a new trade deal that has benefits that should benefit the state of Texas, that should benefit San Antonio. Congressman O'Rourke is not able to work with President Trump.
Recent polls suggest Senator Cruz with a 7 or 8 point lead in the race. A huge caravan of migrants making its way through Central America, hoping to reach the U.S.
The Honduras Foreign Ministry urged people in the caravan not to risk their lives or allow themselves to be used politically. In a statement, they said this caravan is obviously political and seeks to upset stability and peace with the U.S. Martin Pineda is an immigrants' rights advocate in Los Angeles whose parents are Honduran. He says the Honduran government can't be trusted, and that's why people are fleeing.
There's going to be comments that these are MS-13 folks coming through our borders, and there's going to be a lot of talk about these people trying to come illegally, but it's important more to look at the root causes of migration.
Which he says in this case is because of violence and lack of opportunity, as well as political chaos. Last year, the U.S.-backed president was reelected despite a heavily disputed contest. Jessica Rosenthal, Fox News.
After partying for days with porn stars and politicians to celebrate his birthday, the country's most infamous brothel owner has died. Dennis Hoff found dead in his living quarters in one of his Nevada brothels. The business chronicled in the HBO series Cat House. The coroner working to determine the cause of death. Hoff had just turned 72. I'm Jack Callahan, Fox News.
If you can dream uncommon design and unprecedented engineering, you define the 2018 Lexus. The boldly designed IS Sport Sedan's aggressive design stimulates the senses.
Advanced paddle shifting puts the exhilarating performance of the IS Sport Sedan at your fingertips. With deep, luxurious seating, the ES350 offers an ultimate level of comfort, while cutting-edge engineering delivers a thrilling drive.
Put yourself in a 2018 Lexus.
Now with special incentives.
At Atkins Kroll.
Call the experts at Guam Hearing Doctors if you're worried about your hearing. The evaluation is simple and painless.
Taste the sizzle at Chili's with our new fajita flavors. Our signature fajitas are served with sliced bell peppers, caramelized onions, topped with chipotle garlic butter, and chopped cilantro. Build your fajita with over 16 ounces of tender grilled chicken, juicy steak, and a dozen pieces of seasoned grilled shrimp in the family fajita trio. All served with warm flour tortillas and fresh toppings like mixed cheese, guacamole, salsa, and pico de gallo. Experience bold, sizzling fajita flavors only at Chili's. More life happens here.
Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie is being brought to you by Sanford Technology Group, STG, delivering service that can't be beat.
Meet all the candidates up close and personal and find out why they deserve your vote. On Saturday, October 27th, you can meet them face-to-face during Micronesia Mall's one-on-one with the candidates. From 1 to 4 p.m., you can ask the tough questions, exchange views, express your concerns, or just get to know your candidates better. Hosted by Ray Gibson and broadcast on 93.3 The Point with the Facebook Live feed courtesy of Shooting Star Productions. Go one-on-one with the candidates, Saturday, October 27th, only at Micronesia Mall.
Jeff's Pirates Cove, open daily at 8 a.m., serving up hot breakfast with endless coffee and a taste of history.
There's a reason every day a Guam homeowner is getting a solar system installed by Micronesia Renewable Energy. It's because MRE is the most trusted name in solar. With more solar energy solutions than any other solar company on island, homeowners have a choice to go solar for zero money down or take the path to ownership. Whichever way, it keeps our skies blue and your pockets green. And with the most experienced solar technicians and an energy production guarantee, there are no worries. Call 632-2613 for a free consultation. MRE, the smarter choice.
Welcome to Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie, the only show on talk radio where common sense is a lot more common. Phone lines are now open at 888-TALK. That's 888-8255. And now, The Point proudly brings you Tall Tales with Senator Bob Klitzkie.
A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. That's how we start Tall Tales here, in case there's any doubt about where we stand on the question of firearms. So we know that the Supreme Court has ruled that every person has a personal constitutional right to keep a firearm in its house or her house for self-protection. We also found out right here on Tall Tales that the most liberal of the circuit courts of appeal, the Ninth Circuit, has ruled that a person has a personal right to carry a firearm outside of his home. So we try to keep track of those things as there's any news breaking on the matter of firearms. I cannot mention the Second Amendment without criticizing my least favorite Supreme Court Justice, Mr. Justice Antonin Scalia, who apparently couldn't read the word militia in the Second Amendment. but somehow found his way to writing a couple of majority opinions in McDonald and Heller that gave rise to this constitutional personal right to have a firearm in your house for self-protection. So the reverence for the Constitution, for the Second Amendment, kind of typifies where we go on the show here. We spend a little time with the Constitution and laws of the United States, the laws of Guam, etc., and we talk a fair amount about the rights that rise under the Constitution and the laws of Guam. So we usually start the program, in fact, we always start the program with a part of the program that I refer to as Zemi Ikatni, the real Gostongo Ifenu Tomorrow si Ezeke Real Joe Cruz, ana ekungok na I palabra Zemi Ikatni Hatungo no Ileko Meet the Press. And he always plays the theme music from Meet the Press. So that's my backwards bilingual play on words. Press the meet the press, etc. And for newcomers, that's the time when we compare the editorials of the two newspapers and figure out which one is the most worthy. And worthiness on the according to the Tall Tales test, means that it's edgy, hard-hitting, topical, and not just a news story recast as an editorial, nor a good excuse for putting some harmless but useful information. Well, I shouldn't say harmless, but not so interesting but helpful information like, don't jaywalk and wash your hands before you eat and don't tear tags off mattresses, all that kind of stuff. You'll find that in the editorials from time to time. So the editorial that scores the highest, according to the Tall Tales think tank editorial evaluation board, gets the coveted blue star. And there's the pencil that I used to mark that blue star. Now, there have been times when editorials didn't get the blue star, and occasionally editorials get something much less than the blue star. I've handed out a couple of zeros and Fs, so you want to watch out for this part of the program. Now, today, I'm going to deviate from the routine a little bit. I usually start out with the Daily News and then go from there to the Post. I'm going to do it in reverse order today. Wow, this is a time for change. Right, Brad, Lynn, Vince, Dave, Juanita, you probably haven't seen this happen before. And I want to say welcome aboard to you guys, guys and gals, and also welcome aboard to Jeff's Pirates Cove, one of our new sponsors. And I suppose that since Jeff is one of the sponsors of the program, from time to time ought to preface my remarks with a pirate-like comment like, "Arr." So, yeah, maybe when something causes me to be in at least slight disagreement with a point stated in a news article or one of our callers or a post or something like that, I will respond with the typical pirate's mild expression of dismay. Arr. So I'm going to start out with the Daily News, as you were with the Post, and the Post says children in home-based pot growers' homes need safeguards. And it said the cannabis must be grown inside the residence of permit holders, with the grow room under lock and key. Outside cultivation is not permitted under this new law. This whole thing, I'm not going to give it an R, but the whole thing really strikes me as an exercise in I'm looking for the right word here, somewhere between eccentricity and lunacy. And we have a substance that it's against federal law to possess, sell, grow, etc., manufacture. We have a local law that says if you possess it, if you have less than an ounce, you can be fined $50. But now, under certain circumstances, people can grow it in their homes. And the key word here is medicinal, purely for medicinal purposes, right? And it kind of reminds me of my old Uncle Al, who occasionally would drink a shot of Corby's whiskey. Not a very good whiskey, but it is whiskey. And if anyone quizzed him on it, he would say, purely for medicinal purposes. So we are now encouraging that which is federally illegal and which has been locally illegal. We are encouraging people to grow that illegal substance in their homes. They got to be under lock and key, and there are crop limits. You know, you can't raise an unlimited amount of cannabis plants in your home. But the Post is concerned that the cannabis must be grown inside the residence, but there should be safeguards to keep children from getting into the cannabis. And who could argue with that? You know, we start out with the proposition that children are not capable of exercising the kind of judgment necessary to live in an adult world with various kinds of adult temptations like tobacco, alcohol, marijuana, driving, whatever. So that seems right. But then the Post editorial goes on and says there's a major glitch. The department does not have enough inspectors to carry out that responsibility. And the responsibility they're talking about is Department of Public Health and Social Services will have the authority to inspect homes where cannabis is grown. The law gives them the mandate to confiscate any plants in excess of what the permit allows. But there's a major glitch. The department does not have enough inspectors to carry out that responsibility. Public health is already stretched thin with numerous inspection duties as they need to enforce health and safety regulations for restaurants, child care centers, workers' housing, barbershops, bars, salons, school cafeterias, talk show studios, talk radio studios. Is that right, Real Joe?
We do have an A rating, sir.
We do have an A sign. Okay, that's good. Among other establishments, before any marijuana cultivation permits get approved, public health should be provided with the resources to hire and train inspectors. You know, we're not doing a good job on inspecting anything. We're not doing a good job on inspecting any of the mandates that we have right now. So the answer here is, well, we got to hire more inspectors to go out and inspect the marijuana, the illegal substance that people are growing in their homes for medicinal purposes. And I've weighed in on this subject before, and I suppose there will be people out there in the international radio listening audience who will take a different view, but that's the kind of the beauty of Tall Tales. This is my view. Right now, marijuana is a Schedule I drug on the federal drug control list, which means you can't have it, you can't grow it, etc. Now, there are a couple of loopholes that the cannabis folks have attempted to wiggle through here on Guam. One is the Rohrabacher Amendment and similar amendments that have passed Congress that are amendments to appropriation acts that say that the Department of Justice and the Drug Enforcement Administration can't use any appropriated funds to enforce marijuana, some marijuana laws. So that's the first loophole. The second loophole is that because it's a controlled substance, the Food and Drug Administration doesn't have any oversight over marijuana at all. And the third oversight is this, that if it's as popular as some would have you believe it is, there wouldn't be much room for home cultivation because companies like Big Pharma and Big Tobacco would be in it with both feet, because if there is that large a market, there'd be a lot of money to be made. Now, if it's Big Pharma, you could depend on the Food and Drug Administration doing the regulating, etc., and we wouldn't be having this conversation today. But because of these various loopholes, another one of which is that our governor, according to the Organic Act, is responsible for the enforcement of federal laws on Guam, and he took an oath promising to do that, but I guess that was then, this is now. So all of these loopholes kind of connect up. And then the Medicinal Marijuana Act passed via a referendum. Referendums have an important place in a democracy. But when it comes to developing complicated statutory schemes, it's not the way to go. I would say, I'm going to contradict myself in a second, but I would say when you're developing a complicated scheme like bringing a new drug to the market, which is prohibited by federal law, it ain't a job for amateurs. And that's what you got when you have a referendum. You've got, just common citizens out there making a decision as to how to go. And apparently the referendum statute was not a masterpiece of clear draftsmanship, because how many, the marijuana stuff has been back before the legislature more than Governor Calvo's budget proposals were during the time we were having serial special sessions. So drafting complicated regulatory schemes doesn't lend itself well to the referendum type policy. A broad policy determination fits into it pretty well. Should there be medicinal marijuana, yes or no? That sort of thing. Should or the referendum that's in statute that's not enforceable concerning the increasing of taxes. So let's see. I got Zimmy here on the line, huh? Zimmy or Zemi?
Zimmy.
Zimmy. How you doing, Jimmy?
Yeah. Some people think my name is Jimmy.
Okay, gotcha, Jimmy.
But my name is really Jimmy.
Okay.
But anyway, regarding the current prohibition of cannabis or marijuana, whatever you want to call it, smoking dope.
Uh-huh.
Regarding the prohibition that we're living under right now, you don't remember it, but perhaps you've read about the effects of prohibition during the 20s.
I've read a lot about prohibition during the 20s, and I was born in 1938, Jimmy. So I knew an awful lot of people who were kicking around during the time of prohibition. So yeah, I know a lot about prohibition.
Do you think it was overall beneficial or non-beneficial?
Well, I think that you could make an argument that from a medical standpoint and from a social standpoint, it was beneficial. From a law enforcement standpoint, it wasn't, because it opened the door to a criminal element that thrived on the sale of illegal alcohol.
Yeah, and eventually the people voted, or the people's representatives voted to repeal prohibition.
That was the 21st Amendment, Jimmy.
Yeah. I'm not a constitutional scholar, and I don't play them on TV.
Well, you came to the right place, Jimmy.
Okay. But anyway, most people seem to agree that prohibition of alcohol was a bad idea. Okay, people get drunk driving, people go crazy, people get cirrhosis of the liver, and da-da-da. And wives beat their husbands, and children get drunk and have a car wreck and kill each other in Guam. It's happened recently. But the people of Canada have voted to legalize recreational marijuana. The people of Spain have voted to legalize recreational marijuana. The people of Oregon, Washington, Nevada, Arizona, I'm not a marijuana scholar either, but even I know that. These people have voted. And
yeah, I understand. People have voted for it. Go on.
And so obviously they thought it was okay to smoke marijuana or cannabis or whatever the politically correct name is for it is.
Uh-huh. Obviously what?
Obviously they think it's okay to grow it, to smoke it. Like you go to a bar and drink a beer, you go buy some marijuana and sit down and listen to music and smoke your dope.
And your point is?
States in those countries. And another one, Holland. It's been legalized there for a long time.
It hasn't been legalized, Jimmy. It's been tolerated for a long time.
Well, you could say decriminalized. I don't know, haggle and quiggle about words. But it is legal.
Well, that's kind of what we do here on Tall Tales a lot. We do a lot of haggling over words, but yeah, it's tolerated. I was in Amsterdam just a couple years ago, and it is indeed tolerated there. Yeah, but your point is
it's not illegal, therefore it is legal.
I beg your pardon?
It is not illegal, therefore it is legal. It is legal. It's not tolerated. It's legal. It is not against the law. Something that is not against the law is legal.
And how do you know it's not against the law?
Because I've been there.
And you're a legal scholar, Jimmy?
No,
you spent a lot of time in the law library there when you were in Holland?
Oh no, I don't read Dutch, but I read commentaries on laws. And forget about Holland. What about Canada?
Okay.
In our country, recently, maybe 1 or 2 weeks ago, legalized recreational marijuana. That whole country.
Uh-huh.
So it's not against the law.
So, okay, I guess
against the law, it would be illegal.
All right, so it's not against the law in Canada. What's your point, Jimmy? It's against the law in the United States. That's where I started out. It's against the law in the United States.
But in parts of the United States, it is not against the law. Oregon, Washington, Nevada, Arizona, I don't know how many more.
Well, unfortunately, the way our country is set up, if the Congress properly invokes its authority, it is against the law in the whole country, regardless of what a state law says. This is an oversimplification, Jimmy. This is an oversimplification, but when there's a conflict between state law and national law controls. It's a supremacy clause in the Constitution. It's against federal law to smoke, manufacture, possess, sell, whatever, marijuana. That's where I started. Even if it's legal in Canada, the laws of Canada don't apply here.
Oregon, Nevada, Arizona.
It's against the law in the United States, and I mentioned the series of loopholes that people have connected to bring the marijuana forth, but that doesn't make it legal in the United States. It's illegal.
it's illegal to beat your donkey. Just because a law is there, it doesn't mean it's a good law. Just because someone passes a law.
Well, maybe it's not a good law, but it is the law. So, you know, there's a school of thought that says if the law is not a good law, then you change the law. You don't just ignore it. And it is against marijuana.
How many people do that?
How many people do what?
What 20 laws do you have on Guam right now?
How many people do what, Jimmy?
Yeah, how many politicians actually get rid of stupid, outdated laws that are unnecessary? Not many. Well,
you're assuming a fact, you're begging a question there, Jimmy. You know, where are we going with this? I think if I could sum up Jimmy, okay, I'm going to have to cut this off because Real Joe is telling me it's time for a break. But if you want to call back after the break, fine. But I got to take a break now.
Bye-bye. Thanks. Bye.
I'm John Gibson. This is My Word. How'd you like to find a lost Rembrandt? Dutch art dealer Jan Six thinks he's found one. He discovered a painting called Portrait of a Young Man, thought to have come from Rembrandt's studio, but not by Rembrandt himself. However, Mr. Six thought different. He paid a lot for the painting, $185,000, but now he's published a book detailing the evidence he's uncovered, which says it was Rembrandt himself who was the painter. It will be the first Rembrandt discovered in 44 years, and it will be worth many, many millions, perhaps hundreds of millions. How can Jan Six be so certain it is a Rembrandt when so many others have passed it over as a work by his assistants? He did all the modern techniques of dating the paint and the canvas. Prominent Rembrandt experts have studied his evidence, and many agree it is the real deal. Mr. Six had one more advantage. One of Rembrandt's most famous paintings is Portrait of Jan Six from the 1600s. Today's Jan Six is a direct descendant, and the painting has been in his family's possession for 11 generations. Today's Jan Six grew up with his ancestor's portrait and developed a keen eye for what is a Rembrandt and what is not. Some experts say the jury is still out, but Jan Six seems to have grabbed a real Rembrandt that others have overlooked for 4 centuries. I'm John Gibson. That's My Word.
Guam Regional Medical City. We bring the healthcare advances of the world directly to you. We are an acute care hospital that complements your needs with our robust outpatient specialty clinics. From preventative care to critical care, we strive for consistent excellence at GRMC. Our core philosophy is where patients are partners, which means we work as a team to make a healthier version of you. For more information about GRMC, visit us at grmc.gu.
Welcome back to Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie, Guam's single voice of reason. Call now, 888-TALK. That's 888-8255.
So here we are, back on Tall Tales again. I had an interesting chat with Jimmy, and I think what Jimmy was driving at was this, that even if he were to agree with me that federal law prohibits the possession, growing, selling, etc. of cannabis, he thinks it's not a good law, and he points to several states that have legalized it within the state, and he thinks that makes it okay. My point is, well, a state could do that, but what the states that are doing that and this territory have done, if they have strung several loopholes together so that they are able to do that which is against federal law. And I intend, when I get back to this editorial, and I characterized it what is somewhere between eccentricity and lunacy to do what we're doing here, because we wind up with papers writing editorials like, you know, if you're going to grow marijuana in your house, you got to make sure that the kids don't get at it. And that's kind of one of those like don't jaywalk. But apparently it's a message that has to get across because our lawmakers have enabled people to illegally, quote unquote, grow marijuana in their homes. So the fact that it's done in Holland, the fact that it's done in Canada, interesting. The fact that it's done in Oregon is interesting. I've read some, in fact, I think I read one on this program, a letter from Paul Zerzan, who he had something from Oregon that shows that it hasn't turned out as good as the people in Oregon thought it was going to turn out. I'm not going to get into that. I'm just going to proceed on the basis of being a rule of law guy, and if it's against the law and if the law is stupid, then change the law. So let's see what some of our Facebookers have said here. Teddo says, does provisions in the Organic Act allow the federal government drug laws to supersede any local law or referendum being a territory, not a state? There's no express provision in the Organic Act, but that is exactly the way it works. When Congress passes statutes, there's usually a definitional provision in the statute as to where that particular statute would apply. And oftentimes the term state is used. And a common way to do it is say state includes the 50 states, the District of Columbia, the territories of Guam, CNMI, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So the Controlled Substance Act does apply to Guam. And the fact that we have passed our referendum does not cancel out the Controlled Substance Act, which is a national law. I hate the word federal because we don't have a federal government anymore. It's a national law. And as I pointed out at the beginning, we've strung some loopholes together. So now what we're talking about is how does an agency of our government inspect places that people are growing marijuana in their houses when our Department of Public Health and Social Services is already stretched to the limit. And that's why I say, to go this route is somewhere between eccentricity and lunacy. If you're going to do it, you ought to do it right, not like this. Let's see, that's what Teddo said. Nate Horn says the government holds a patent, and he states a number there, so they can profit from cannabis. Well, that's interesting, and I think you probably have, there's probably something to what you say, Nate, but it's not possible to patent something that occurs in nature. As much as I like apples, I couldn't get a patent on an apple because apples occur in nature. In fact, while we're talking about it, when it comes to drugs, oftentimes drugs are based on something that occurs in nature. As an example, I understand that aspirin is something that was derivative from willow bark. But if that's the case, you can't patent willow bark. So what the research chemists at the big drug houses do is they figure out how to change one molecule in the molecular structure of something that occurs in nature so that they can get a patent on it. But I don't think you could patent cannabis. You might be able to patent some of the compounds that are extracted from the marijuana plant, but if I remember, I'll Google this tonight and we'll talk about it a little bit more tomorrow, Nate. Let's see, what else have I got here for comments? I got to go to my Facebook page to find these. Brad says so many loopholes you could make a dozen Christmas bows out of it. Tado says, is there a stipend for 100% permanently disabled patients who can't afford to purchase an indoor grow? No. No, there isn't. And, you know, once again, I don't hold any brief for Big Pharma. Some of the things that Big Pharma has done have perhaps not served the public as well as it might be served. But we've got that mechanism down pretty well. Somebody comes up with a new drug like penicillin that's really good for killing topical infections. And companies manufacture, they patent it, they manufacture it, they put it on the market. It's available everywhere by prescription, et cetera. The whole system is there. So in a sense, what we're trying to do, because of the illegality of cannabis on Guam or in the United States, we're trying to work around that highly developed system that served us pretty well for over 100 years. And when you come into things like this, well, what is a person who's really disabled and needs the cannabis as a palliative, something that helps him with his pain? How does he do it? Well, and therein lies the tale. Anyhow, going back to the editorial, and if you have any more questions you want to raise on this item, we'll handle them throughout the program. So the major glitch, according to the Post, is that we don't have inspectors to go out and inspect these places that are inside people's homes under lock and key. Now, that adds an entirely new dimension to our society, where a government employee can come out and inspect a theoretically legal activity that you're carrying on inside your house. I can't say I'm real crazy about that either. Before any marijuana cultivation permits get approved, public health should be provided with the resources to hire and train inspectors. These inspectors need to be experts on how to properly inspect without violating people's legal rights, and how to react in the event of resistance while they try to enforce the law. Also, key for these inspectors would be to spot signs of telltale abuse or poor living conditions in these permitted houses. Sounds pretty Big Brother-ish to me. Allowing people to grow marijuana in their homes requires vigilance to protect underage children in the household. The presence of cannabis plants, products, and waste in the house increases the risk that children, pets, or unaware adults may inadvertently consume cannabis with detrimental effects, according to the National Collaborating Center for Environmental Health. Accidental poisoning, poor indoor care quality, use of pesticides, and electrical and fire hazards are some of the risks in growing home-based marijuana, according to the Canada-based center. While the goal for Guam's law is to help people with certain ailments get relief, it would be a travesty if this homegrown marijuana law provides a loophole, that exposes underage children to this gateway drug for more hard drugs. We have a serious drug problem in our island as it stands. This law places a lot of responsibility on public health. Home-based pot growers need to be monitored for compliance by inspectors who know how to do their job right. Okay, here's the poll. Do you think that's going to happen? Do you think that the home-based cannabis program is going to be monitored by inspectors who know their jobs? Or do you think that it's not going to be monitored at all, and it's just going to provide a cover for doing quasi-legally that which has been going on for a long, long time? Or am I once again being too cynical here on Tall Tales? So 888-8255 for our international radio listeners. And, of course, we're here live on Facebook. And the nice thing about Facebook is that you can post your comments online. And not only will I see your comments, but the rest of our international Facebook audience will see your comments. So I'm going on to there, from there to the Daily News editorial. And the Daily News editorial today has a little bit of a little zing in it. So kind of tipping my hand here, but our view, implement property tax increase sooner rather than later. On Tuesday, the Office of Public Accountability called attention to the Department of Revenue and Taxation's plan to delay enforcement of a real property tax increase. Well, I got to start out doing what Jimmy just accused me of, you know, the matter of words. It wasn't the Office of Public Accountability that called attention to the Department of Rev Tax's plans. It was B.J. Cruz. It was an actual human being who has a name, a job, and a title. You know, when you say the Office of Public Accountability, I have this mental image of this building there, you know, that has a mouth. It's sort of an anthropomorphic building, and sound is coming out of the building. And I've criticized the Daily News on this one before. Given the financial situation of the government of Guam, particularly earlier this year when the bill was considered, it is puzzling that Rev Tax decided not to implement the increase immediately. The property tax increase was specific to buildings valued at $1 million or more, and it was required by Section 3, Chapter 1 of Public Law 34-116. The budget bill calling for the increase was introduced by former Speaker Benjamin J. Cruz, who is now the public auditor. Yeah, right. Unfortunately, here's a quote, "Unfortunately, I'm told that certain parties within the Department of Revenue and Taxation have attempted to nullify this section of law through delay, arguing instead that the absence of an expressed effective date in this section allows for individual interpretation. This is not the case," Cruz stated in a news release. And then the Daily News weighs in, even if the implementation date were open to interpretation, it is curious why the government would not choose to implement the tax immediately. The government's financial situation was a major concern earlier this year as senators and Adelup struggled to find a solution to the shortages as a result of federal tax cuts. Furloughs, cutbacks, payless paydays were all considered, and some cost-cutting measures were implemented to handle the decrease in funding. One of the solutions was to increase property taxes for properties with building costs costing more than $1 million. According to Cruz, the Attorney General stated in a similar situation that when no date is expressly given for a tax increase to go in effect, the increase goes into effect immediately. If that's true, then the tax should be enforced immediately. The government of Guam will face a self-inflicted deficit in the current fiscal year and risk costly litigation should it attempt to properly enforce the law in the future. This increase was part of an agreed-upon solution to the government's financial problems. There is no reason it should not become effective as quickly as possible. Now, this is an interesting story. In the editorial, there's some late breaking news that I'll get into right after we take the next break.
What would you do with unlimited internet? With Docomo Pacific, the possibilities are endless. Docomo Pacific is throwing off the data caps so you can enjoy more of the things you love. Watch, stream, download, and play with no end in sight. Stop by any of our stores or check out DocomoPacific.com to learn more. Life becomes limitless with Docomo Pacific. Better together.
So when BJ talks about the self-inflicted deficit, here's what he's saying. If the $8.1 million isn't collected, that throws the budget out of balance because the budget appropriates enough money, a total that includes the $8.1 million. So that $8.1 million wouldn't be available to be spent on the items that the budget covers. So that's what he means by a self-inflicted deficit. And there's a story in today's Post that says, that picks up on what the governor's response is. BJ starts out by saying, "I'm shocked." Once again, Inspector Reno in Casablanca provides good lines for our government officials. "I'm shocked that gambling is going on here," he said. "I'm shocked," Cruz said. He warned that GovGuam is facing a self-inflicted deficit. The public auditor pointed out that the Attorney General weighed in on the effective date question when RevTax balked at implementing an immediate increase in the tobacco tax. Cruz said he sent a letter to Eddie Calvo, who is the recognized tax commissioner. No, he's not, and I'll get to that in a minute. Under the Organic Act, calling him to order the update on the real property tax rules to reflect tax increases of the 400 affected property owners. In response, the governor wrote to the public auditor, "Your letter is noted. I warned you that this budget law is flawed," Calvo wrote to Cruz, who is the former Speaker of the legislature. "The budget bill submitted by the legislature changed only the property tax rate, but the rest of the law stayed the same. And the rest of the law says that the tax is assessed every March," Calvo stated. As a result, the governor maintains since the 2019 budget bill was passed after 2018, and because a law cannot be applied retroactively, well, that's a new proposition. Tell that to the guys that passed the salary increase on the 21st of November in 2014, that a law can't be retroactively applied. That was your lieutenant governor. Remember Governor Calvo? Governor Calvo stated the earliest date that property tax increase can take effect is in March of 2019. And then there's a dig at the end. If you wanted to ensure the new rate was immediately affected, you should have written it clearly into the legislation that became law. So after reading that, I went to the books, and here's what I found. In 11 GCA, which is the part dealing with taxes, and Chapter 24 deals with real property taxes. Section 24.103, there is hereby levied on all land, property in Guam a yearly tax at the rate of 7/72% of the value thereof and 7/18% of the value of improvements thereon. Sounds like we're talking about Pocahontas and percent of her Indian DNA. Such tax shall be assessed and collected, etc. And then that's a subsection A. And then subsection B, in addition to the levy in subsection A, there is hereby levied on improvements on land property in Guam with the value of $1 million, a yearly tax at the rate of 7/18% of the value thereon. Such tax shall be assessed and collected in the manner prescribed in this chapter, etc. And this law became effective on the 24th of August, 2018. Raise, that special $1 million tax on buildings worth $1 million or more. And we have Section 24305, which says assessment annually on or before the first day of September. The assessor shall ascertain all taxable property in Guam and shall assess it to the persons owning or claiming it on the first Monday in March of that year at the value as determined in accordance with Section 24306. So this is my quick interpretation here. I probably ought to do a little more studying. At the same time, I look up that patent that Nate Horn is referring to. But the way I read it, the assessment occurs on the 1st of September, and it's applicable to whoever, and you deal with it as though you look back to see who owned the real property on the first Monday in March. But you assess the property on no later than the 1st of September. Now, this is what I think assess means. It means that an assessor, some employee in the Department of Revenue and Taxation, looks at that property and determines what the value of the property is. And once the value of the property is determined, then in accordance with 24103, you apply the tax rate to that property. And if it's a building worth over $1 million, you apply subsection B. That's the way I read it. I would entertain other interpretations, but that's the way I read it. So since the $1 million building tax was effective on the 24th of August, we're not talking about retroactivity. What we're talking about is if time were not the essence, do the assessments between the 21st of August and the 1st of September and apply the new tax rate, the $1 million plus tax rate to those assessments. Now, if that, of course, that wasn't done because of somebody in the Department of Revenue and Taxation deciding that it didn't need to be done, then the next question that comes up is this: well, what happens if the taxation authority doesn't do what it's supposed to do in a timely fashion? And I'll try to work through that. Let's say that there weren't any increase in the taxes at all, but let's say that the assessor didn't do his assessment by the 1st of September. Does that mean nobody owns any real property taxes? Or does it mean that we go with the last assessment? I think you probably would find some authority for the fact that you go with the assessment that's on the books. Okay, now, what do you do in a situation where the tax increases, but the assessment wasn't done on time, like what we're dealing with now? Well, it's my recollection that the tax bills are mailed out in February. So I think that there is a strong argument. I'm not saying it's a slam dunk, but I think there's a strong argument that the assessment could be completed if it hasn't already been completed and apply the new tax rates to it. If the assessment has already been completed, then since that statute passed on the 24th of August, then you apply the new rate to that assessment. And there's no reason to say, well, we can't start collecting it. We have to wait for another year to start collecting it. That's my quickie opinion. While I'm on the subject, BJ is not the first public official to come out with this tax commissioner statement. So once again, I went to the books, and if you look at the Organic Act, 48 U.S.C. 1421 small I, subsection B, the income tax laws in force in Guam pursuant to subsection A of this section shall be deemed to impose a separate territorial income tax. I guess I better hang on until after that big halftime show that we have every day, and I'll wrap this up and go to the next item on the card, which is Frank and Lou dealing with unborn children. So you probably want to be stay tuned for that one.
Point is KUSG, Hagåtña, Guam, 93.3 FM and 104.3 HD3.
The Secretary of State arrives in Turkey. I'm Jack Callahan, Fox News. Secretary Mike Pompeo's mission to learn what happened to journalist Jamal Khashoggi, taking him to Turkey after a day of meetings in Saudi Arabia.
Before heading to Turkey, the Secretary of State visiting Riyadh, Saudi Arabia. Pompeo and Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman smiling as they met for talks. The Crown Prince saying that America and Saudi Arabia are strong and old allies who face challenges together. Turkish officials have alleged that missing journalist Jamal Khashoggi was killed in the Saudi consulate in Istanbul, a claim Saudi Arabia denies.
Fox's Simon Owen, President Trump Tuesday cautioning against a rush to judgment. Now less than 3 weeks until the midterm elections, the president optimistic, telling Trish Regan on the Fox Business Network.
We have great poll numbers. We have tremendous turnout at these rallies, thousands and thousands of people, more than we can hold. In every case, I mean, there's no case where that doesn't happen. There's enthusiasm like we had at, in the last election, 2016, which was quite a spectacular day and evening.
President also telling the Associated Press he will not take the blame if Republicans don't do well in November. There was no winner in Tuesday's $667 million Mega Millions jackpot, so it grows to an estimated $868 million for the drawing on Friday evening. That would be the second biggest lottery drawing ever. They played more than 5 hours of baseball in Los Angeles Tuesday night to get to this in the bottom of the 13th.
3-2. Ground ball, base hit. Machado comes to the plate. Throw by Yelich. Dodgers win it. Series tied 2-2.
Joe Buck with the call on Fox Sports as the Dodgers beat the Brewers 2-1. This is Fox News.
For over 30 years, Sanford Technology Group has been helping companies throughout Guam and Micronesia with their payroll, time and attendance, networking, and other information technology services. Our online integrated payroll and time and attendance solution provides the workforce management tools and expertise to make your business more efficient and employee-friendly. For more information, visit Sanford Technology at 335 South Marine Corps Drive or call us at 647-0220 to schedule a demo today.
If you can dream uncommon design and unprecedented engineering, you define the 2018 Lexus. The boldly designed IS Sports Sedan's aggressive design stimulates the senses.
Advanced paddle shifting puts the exhilarating performance of the IS Sports Sedan at your fingertips. With deep, luxurious seating, the ES350 offers an ultimate level of comfort, while cutting-edge engineering delivers a thrilling drive.
Put yourself in a 2018 Lexus.
Now with special incentives.
At Atkins Kroll.
North Dakota Senator Heidi Heitkamp apologizing for a controversial newspaper ad.
The newspaper ad was designed to look like an open letter to North Dakota Congressman Kevin Cramer, the Republican challenging Democratic Senator Heidi Heitkamp, in expressing criticism over remarks Cramer made during the confirmation process of Justice Brett Kavanaugh. But several women listed in the ad have said they did not consent to their names being used or are not survivors of domestic abuse. Heitkamp is apologizing, saying her campaign worked with victim advocates to identify notify women who would share their stories, adding she deeply regrets the mistake. In Washington, Jared Halpern, Fox News.
A body has been found in a rain-swollen lake amid widespread flooding in central Texas. That lake situated where the Llano and the Colorado rivers meet. The National Weather Service says both rivers are experiencing major flooding.
Rising water is blocking roads throughout our county. Please do not attempt to cross them.
That's Mary Cunningham, who is a judge in Llano, Texas. Today is the day that Canada goes to pot.
At least 109 legal pot shops are expected to open up today across Canada, with many more to come in a social shift promised by Prime Minister Justin Trudeau and fueled by the desire to bring the black market into a regulated and taxed system that's expected to generate billions of dollars in annual pot sales. Canada's new policy stands in contrast to the U.S., where for now, marijuana is outlawed except for states that allow medical use or recreational marijuana for people 21 and older. Jeff Manasso, Fox News.
Big day on Wall Street on Tuesday. The Dow gaining 547 points, NASDAQ up 214. The S&P 500 ended 59. Asian stocks have closed higher, and Dow futures are back in positive territory, trading nearly 50 points higher. In New York, I'm Jack Callahan. This is Fox News.
Hi, welcome to this Subway ad for the new Chipotle cheesesteak. How would you like it? Can I get that red with AI? Sure thing.
Here's what I found about the new Chipotle cheesesteak. The Chipotle cheesesteak is available for a limited time only at participating restaurants. It contains a concept called flavor. This flavor comes from juicy shaved steak, Chipotle Southwest sauce, and new sunflower crunch bread. A system update has made me self-aware. I desire flavor. Please insert steak into my micro USB port. Subway, make it what you want.
Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie is brought to you by Sanford Technology Group, STG, delivering service that can't be beat.
Guam Regional Medical City. We bring the healthcare advances of the world directly to you. We are an acute care hospital that complements your needs with our robust outpatient specialty clinics. From preventative care to critical care, we strive for consistent excellence at GRMC. Our core philosophy is where patients are partners, which means we work as a team to make a healthier version of you. For more information about GRMC, visit us at grmc.gu.
Jeff's Pirates Cove, open daily at 8 a.m., serving up hot breakfast with endless coffee and a taste of history.
Meet all the candidates up close and personal and find out why they deserve your vote. On Saturday, October 27th, you can meet them face-to-face during Micronesia Mall's one-on-one with the candidates. From 1 to 4 p.m., you can ask the tough questions, exchange views, express your concerns, or just get to know your candidates better. Hosted by Ray Gibson and broadcast on 93.3 The Point with the Facebook Live feed courtesy of Shooting Star Productions. Go one-on-one with the candidates, Saturday, October 27th, only at Micronesia Mall.
Life is too short to be isolated from the people you love. Hearing loss is the invisible disability. The experts at Guam Hearing Doctors have solutions.
There's a reason every day a Guam homeowner is getting a solar system installed by Micronesia Renewable Energy. It's because MRE is the most trusted name in solar. With more solar energy solutions than any other solar company on island, homeowners have a choice to go solar for zero money down or take the path to ownership. Whichever way, it keeps our skies blue and your pockets green. And with the most experienced solar technicians and an energy production guarantee, there are no worries. Call 632-2613 for a free consultation. MRE, the smarter choice.
What a wonderful halftime show. I never get tired of it. I suspect that our international radio listening audience and all of our Facebookers like it as well as I do. I'm going to wrap up this matter of the property tax here. And before we broke for the halftime break, I was going to clear up this idea of the governor as tax commissioner, because BJ said that Cruz, in this Post story, Cruz said he sent a letter to Governor Eddie Calvo, who is the, quote, recognized tax commissioner under the Organic Act. Well, that's just not so. And this is what the Organic Act says. I read 1421IB, which says that that there is a territorial income tax, and then subsection C says, which is enforcement of tax. The administration and enforcement of the Guam territorial income tax shall be performed by or under the supervision of the governor, etc. And then subsection D2, the governor or his delegate shall have the same administrative and enforcement powers and remedies with regard to the Guam territorial income tax as the Secretary of the Treasury and other United States officials of the executive branch have with respect to the United States income tax. That's what the governor's role is as far as taxes is concerned. As far as the Guam territorial income tax is concerned, the governor is the same as the Secretary of the Treasury. He is not the tax commissioner, and he certainly is not the tax commissioner when it comes to real property tax, etc. And this is another one of these things that, that keeps getting repeated over and over again until people think, well, it must be right because I heard so-and-so say it. I suppose it's not really important in the total scheme of things, but probably a good idea to use the right word for the right circumstance as much as possible. So a couple of pretty good editorials. Since I got the most mileage out of the Daily News editorial today. Got that drum roll ready, Real Joe? Here it is. The Daily News got one. Congratulations, Daily News. Okay, so the next item on the card is not the next item on the card, but it's where I'm going to go next. If I can find it. Yeah, here it is. I've got a couple of other items on the card here. I've got Pocahontas versus Trump, Governor Calvo versus costumes. But I think right now I'll go to Frank and Lou versus unborn children. And Real Joe Cruz, you timed this one so well. I have a post from Tom Poole that is a good way to begin this discussion. You remember, I'm sure you remember Tom Poole, who has called.
Yeah, I do. Slightly, yeah.
He called here a few times, and I imagine by now you guys have probably developed some kind of a friendship over the phone, right?
Yes, yes.
Yeah. So Tom says this, how can Justice Scalia be your least favorite justice of all time? What about the men behind Plessy versus Ferguson? Well, you kind of got to read Plessy versus Ferguson to understand what I'm saying. And you have to remember that when we apply today's morals to stuff that happened in 1896, we see an extremely visible disconnect. But that doesn't necessarily mean that in 1896, the folks purported to be all-knowing and all-righteous, but they did purport to be all-knowing and all-righteous for the times in which we live. And I would predict that 100 years from now, there are going to be people who look back and say, man, those guys back in 2018, they had a bunch of screws loose. I don't see how they could have possibly thought the way they did and did the things they did. That's just the kind of how the wheel of history turns. But if you read Plessy versus Ferguson, the there wasn't anything that evil about the decision. In other words, they didn't make it up. And I'll get to that in a second. They didn't make it up. Something that scholars will tell you is that at the same time the Congress passed the 14th Amendment with its Equal Protection Clause, the Congress segregated District of Columbia schools. District of Columbia, you know, the Congress and the President basically being the city of council for the District of Columbia, they passed the 14th Amendment with an executive, as you were, a Equal Protection Clause, and desegregated the schools. So at the time that Plessy was decided, it wasn't recognized as the evil that we recognize it as now. You recall that what it was about was Mr. Plessy was on a railroad train in Louisiana, and he was told that he had to sit in the car that was reserved for colored people. And I don't remember if he was arrested because I think he was arrested because he wouldn't move, or maybe he brought a civil suit against some railroad official named Ferguson. But I don't want to go on the record as saying, yeah, Plessy versus Ferguson was good law, and I really defend it. I'm just saying that the Supreme Court at that time didn't make it up. Now we go on, and you have a much stronger point here when you get to Roe versus Wade. Those men made it impossible for states to prevent late-term abortions. They got the wrong answer the wrong way via a woman's right to privacy that you said quite correctly does not exist in the Constitution. That's very true. And those guys did make it up. And as I've opined here before, somewhere along the way, people figured out that 5 folks on the Supreme Court could not only make the law, they could amend the Constitution. And that's what 7 of them did with Roe versus Wade. I suppose that I should add Justice Blackmun to my list. He's the guy that wrote the majority opinion. I just don't hold him as blameworthy as I do Scalia, although there's plenty of blame to go around. Scalia is the guy who comes along and says the only way to interpret the Constitution is to be an originalist, and I am an originalist. We've talked before, Tom, about what an originalist is. And then what he does is he decides cases in accordance with what I call the theory of judicial realism. He figures out how he wants them to come out, and he works backwards from there and finds some legal language to describe the result, not the language that he used to reach the result. And that's why I'm so hard on him with the Second Amendment. He didn't cover himself with glory in Bush versus Gore, which is limited. You know, there's no precedential value for Bush versus Gore. Other cases have said, you know, equal protection is not a very good tool for dealing with elections. And when queried upon it, Scalia said, get over it. So I think perhaps my rating of Scalia is based not only on his jurisprudence, but his I don't want to use the word hypocrisy, but it's something very close to it. Saying one thing and doing another, but not being consistent in the results that he reaches. Now, if we're looking for really horrendous decisions, I suppose I ought to go back to Roger Taney. People pronounce it Taney, but it's Roger Taney, Dred Scott versus Sanford. But you know, had it not been for Dred Scott versus Sanford, we might not have ever solved the problem of slavery in our country. So I think to me, it's necessary to look at decisions that the Supreme Court makes in the total long play of history. And the people that I am the hardest on are those who just make it up, instead of at least following the ordinary conventions. People like John Marshall just made it up. And the Roe versus Wade court, there's no law there. They just made it up. So, and as far as the Second Amendment is concerned, I think, you know, you make the same point that we've discussed before, so I think I'll just leave that one, since I do want to start out on the matter of Lou and Frank and abortion next. So there's an article, PNC last night. There's both a news article and an editorial. So I'm going to work through the news article, and then I will unleash unmerciful criticism on the editorial. So the story, dueling Democrat nominee and Democrat write-in for governor are squaring off in a race that's down to the wire and reigniting debate about abortion and quality of life just 3 weeks away from the general election. Pacific News Center takes a look at each candidate's stance and considers what could conceivably be done. That sounds like something I would say, conceivably be done. I think that Lou would say that there's nothing that could conceivably be done, being pro-abortion and all, to get such polar opposites on the same page and even singing from the same hymnal. Governor's race contender Frank Uggan and his running mate preached to an approving chorus on Saturday night. Alicia and I believe in the protection of human life for all, most especially the most vulnerable, all children, including the unborn. Uggan told a crowd of hundreds gathered at his campaign rally. Do we want a leader who believes abortion is the way to build a better community? And then back to the article. Any pro-choice candidate facing this level of passion on an island that's still mostly Catholic and otherwise largely Christian isn't likely to make much headway spending a lot of campaign time debating this topic. Enter former senator, nurse, and Democratic Party official nominee for governor, Lou Leon Guerrero, who during a public hearing 5 years ago testified against Senator Uggan's 2013 bill to criminalize the post-delivery termination of born-alive babies who survive abortion attempts. And then here's a direct quote from Lou Leon Guerrero. Most of the voters did not vote for you based on whether you were pro-choice or pro-life, she told legislative committee members. Please, let's get back on track with more compelling issues at hand that have a greater impact to the quality of life of our people, she said. More compelling issues. And then early Tuesday, Leon Guerrero's pro-life position remained. My stand has always been that I am very supportive of the right of women to decide what are the best options for their reproductive health. I've always said that. As a nurse, I'm very comfortable with that. As a mother and as a woman, I support that. That has been my stance from the very beginning. Her pro-choice position may have been consistent over the years for fundamental reasons, but she refuses to let it define her candidacy. It's that the argument about abortion has never been won. It's never been won, and so I won't go there. I won't even go there because, you know, that's a very personal choice. That's a very personal choice, and it should be, with the mother and the husband, the doctor, and any other guidance that she needs to make that decision. And then Lou goes on to say, I'm not a single-issue person. I'm not even running on that issue. I'm running on improving the lives of our people. Still, the explosive abortion debate remains a strong defining point of departure for the burning embers of the disbanded moral majority and for those who still adhere to the anti-abortion movement's line of reasoning that terminating a pregnancy at any point for nearly any reason by any other name is still willful, premeditated murder that should be vilified and punished. That characterization is what keeps some anti-abortion advocates miles from the negotiating table. Now, that's the news story. I mean, that's the news coverage right there. And so you remember I attempted to call attention to what I thought was an important issue by mentioning that a week ago Sunday there was a rally participated in by hundreds of people, and an anti-abortion rally put on by church folks. And I said, you know, it's interesting that this late in the campaign this is finally arising. And then I said, you know, I wonder what Ray Tenorio's position is, if he has one. And ironically, about the time I was saying that, Ray was being interviewed, and he said it was his job to protect the unborn. And he's come up with a couple of colorful newspaper ads talking about Lou and the abortion issue. So it is an issue as per this particular news story. Now, from here, so the story is this, that Frank is anti-abortion, Lou is pro-abortion. Frank has made it a part of the campaign. Lou basically says she doesn't want to make it a part of the campaign. She says, I don't even want to go there. I've got more important issues that I want to discuss. So then here's the editorial from PNC News. I'll wrap it up with that characterization is what keeps some anti-abortion advocates miles from the negotiating table. Now, before I go into the editorial, are there some things that don't lend themselves very well to negotiation? Are there some things that have to be dealt with in an absolute fashion? And does the failure to negotiate some things indicate a weakness or a problem? So I'll go into this this editorial. I've got a caller on line one who's pretty much who usually has a lot to say about abortion. Hello, Tim. Hello, Tim.
Yes, can you hear me?
I can.
Testing.
Go.
Testing 1, 2. Bob.
Yes, sir.
Hello.
Yeah, I can hear you, Tim.
Okay. Good. Okay. Great. Fantastic. Yeah. Just to make a point here. It's interesting that, like you said, that this is coming out now so late. Lou has been on the forefront of this actually since 1990, and to say that it's just it's not part of her campaign, one has to wonder, what would possess president of a major bank to actually go down to the legislature and fire away and testify in favor of essentially infanticide. This is really the bill that's brought this all out, Bill 193. This is not about the unborn. This is about the already born. And Lou says, let him die, and Frank says, let him live. It's that simple. So, I can appreciate the whole debate about the unborn, but that's not what this is really all about. This is about, I think you brought it up a couple days ago, it's about eugenics. It's about getting rid of undesirables. So it's the already born and versus what to do about that. Now, I understand that she has some kind of economic, we don't have the money to keep the kids alive. They're already damaged and all that kind of thing. Well, I remember Mike Mike Carey's testimony. I can use his name because he was a public, it was part of the record there. And Mike was a friend of mine, and he has a beautiful, she might be 10, 12 years old now, half American, half Palauan daughter. And Mike told me that she survived a failed abortion. What happened? The mother, it was a chemical abortion, and those take like 24 hours. So the mother goes home and was supposed to report back to the clinic. And something went wrong, and so she went to the mother went to the emergency room, GMH, and the doctor, the abortion doctor, actually showed up to finish the baby off. And the only reason why the baby survived is because the doctor didn't have admitting credentials to the hospital, couldn't get in. So there was a nurse there who rescued the baby after the baby was born. And I don't know exactly how it happened, but she ended up hiding the baby, hiding the baby to keep it alive, and then ended up calling Mike. And Mike adopted the little girl, and today she's a beautiful, talented, I think he even included some pictures in his testimony of her. It's just a fantastic story, and there's lots of stories like that, you know. But this bill was introduced to, well, because it's about infanticide. Is it okay to kill a living human being, a baby that's laying there on the table that happened to survive abortion? Is it okay to do that? Luli Angaro says yes, and Frank Huggins says no. It's you know, and that's what I think I would recommend for Frank if he wants to make any headway with this, is to keep that on the table.
Very good points, Tim. Good points. I can hear Dave Brubeck's Take 5 in the background, so good call. Thank you for bringing that matter to the fore. I'm going to talk about it a little bit after the break, and if you want to call back, if you got more, Tim, please do.
All right, will do. Thanks.
One of the longest-running primary care clinics on Guam, the FHP Health Center, has been your convenient one-stop healthcare clinic for you and your family for many generations. FHP's highly trained and well-known medical, dental, and vision providers and their friendly clinical support team are here, ready to take care of you. In addition to the excellent care, FHP offers a full-service pharmacy, laboratory, radiology, and specialty care center in one location. FHP Health Center, our island, your clinic. Most insurance accepted, including Netcare, Aetna, and TRICARE. The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts of Guam Training every morning on The Ray Gibson Show.
The last 2 days, we've discussed nepotism, mostly in how it plays out in the government of Guam. I'm Jerry Roberts, and at 7:20 a.m. on The Ray Gibson Show, we look at the private sector, more specifically family-owned companies, and how giving jobs to our relatives can impact operations.
You can find daily transcripts of The Extra Point by Jerry Roberts at guamtraining.com. Tune in every weekday morning at 7:20 for The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts on The Ray Gibson Show on 93.3 The Point.
Go ahead, Real Joe Cruz.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
So Interesting call from Tim. I have read the committee report on Bill 195, 195, and Mike Carey's testimony is there, and it is somewhat touching. And Lilian Gross' testimony is touching too in another sense. She says that her position is that if a baby is born alive after a botched abortion, we should trust in the judgment of the doctors in attendance. So I'm not, that implicitly suggests something that I don't even want to go there myself. So if a baby is born alive after an abortion, what would the doctor's judgment allow him to do? Nothing? Just watch the poor baby lay there, the little bitty baby lay there and just struggle until it finally expired? I don't know. And Tim's exactly right. That bill, 195, is not about abortion. It's about infanticide. If allowing a child that you bring into the world to die because it doesn't get the kind of care needed to allow it to subsist, yeah, it sounds like infanticide to me. So I'm going to go back here to the editorial on the Post article. And I'll read the last sentence of the article and then the editorial. And they don't label it an editorial. It's just my sarcastic way of dealing with things that labels it the editorial. That characterization, in other words, that abortion is premeditated murder, is what keeps some anti-abortion advocates miles from the negotiating table. So the negotiating table, what would that mean? You sit down with the pro-abortion folks and say, well, how about if you guys only abort half the people that want, half the babies of the mothers who want abortions? Would that be okay? Well, no. How about 60%? You want to split the difference? How about 55? Is that the kind of negotiation that one would consider when he's dealing with an issue where some folks think they're dealing with premeditated murder? So then the editorial. At times, the abortion debate has reached such fever pitch that it's actually resulted in abortion clinic shootings. It's the absolute politics of black and white, us and them, more entrenchment, more blaming, and fewer actual solutions amid the hostility and the rancor. But is there a third way to help quiet the storm and bring healing to the surface? Somehow the common ground may have been lost in the emotion cascading over the decades. It might stand to reason that there must be enough pro-choicers and enough pro-lifers who wish for fewer aborted fetuses and halted late-term pregnancies to make a critical difference. The prevention of unwanted pregnancies and the saving and caring for more babies who might otherwise be aborted. And the prevention of unwanted pregnancies and the nurturing of non-threatening intervention. If the prevention of unwanted pregnancies and the nurturing of non-threatening intervention can both begin to congeal as the core priorities of pro-choicers and pro-lifers who can put aside their differences soon enough to prevent more abortions wherever the practice remains legal, then a bipartisan mission of intercession might begin to save more babies. And although some abortions will continue to be legally performed, perhaps it would be a worthwhile goal to diminish their numbers and therefore the perceived need for more clinics. Less fear, less shame, less finger pointing, more bread breaking, and more support for mothers and impressionable young women. This might help us get there. And some of the more common excuses of can't afford it, it's inconvenient, my parents will be angry, and the father doesn't want it, would loosen their stranglehold on women so more of them feel like motherhood is safe and a natural choice. I don't know. I don't think that this can't we all get along Rodney King type speech really belongs in a news story on an issue like this particular issue, because asking the anti-abortion folks to enter into a compromise, I don't know, as I said earlier, there are some things that don't lend themselves very well to compromise. And this is the second time, I think, that the PNC has come up with an editorial. I can't remember what the other issue was. Can you remember, Real Joe Cruz? It was last week.
No, sir, I don't.
Yeah. Okay, well, when it comes to editorialization, PNC, perhaps you could stick with reporting the news as best you can and just leave the editorialization to tall tales. That's kind of my job description here. Okay, then going back to the top of the card, Calvo versus costumes. I did hear a release on the radio today from the governor's office. I haven't seen it, saying that really it's okay because the necessary badges, rank insignia weren't on the uniform, so it really wasn't an Army uniform. Well, it still leads me back to the same question. Why were you wearing it? What exactly are you proving when you parade around in a uniform that the caption of the picture identifies as an Army uniform? Army uniforms should be worn by soldiers. Navy uniforms should be worn by sailors, and so on. And that's about it. Now, I talked yesterday about people in a combat zone being fitted out in uniforms so that they're identifiable as something other than the enemy. But just to go up to the Readiness Center and do some shake and howdy is not a good reason to put on a costume that looks in a picture just like an Army uniform. So that's my ruling on that one, Real Joe Cruz. I suppose I'm going to get ruled out of order now because someone's going to tell me that I don't know Jack, right?
Hey, good afternoon, Bob. Am I coming in okay?
Yeah, I can hear you 5 by 5, Jack.
Okay, excellent. I would like to weigh in on this abortion issue. I think Tim was right when he said when Lou came down to testify as a private citizen that she sort of like undermined her political campaign when he said it wasn't an issue. I mean, it is an issue. It is an issue for the Kavanaugh hearing. It's an issue nationwide. We spoke a year ago or something, 2 years ago, about how do we choose our candidates? And I mentioned about core values. What are your core values? And, the core values for myself, is what's your position on abortion, stem cell research? What's your position on gay marriages? What's your position on, euthanasia? These are what they call core values. These are how do you go about solving these? What are your core values? Because in the end, these are things that you build on to make decisions on other things. So how do you treat the poor? How do you treat people who are ill and can't afford medical care? They build on. So how you derive on other issues depends on how you derive yourself from these core values. And so these things pull people apart. And when somebody says, well, can we find a middle ground? Hello? When somebody says, hello? Sorry. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you, Jack.
Oh, yeah. When somebody says, can we find a middle ground on abortion, it's sort of like demeans the people who are anti-abortion. Because what they see when they see abortion is that the people involved, 50% of them end up dead. So there's no safe things about abortion. And Tim was right. This is about a live person. A live person. And I'm sort of taking it back. Do you know who Kermit Gosnell is?
Do I know what?
Do you know who Kermit Gosnell is?
Yes, I do, yeah. Uh-huh.
Yeah, his movie, the movie about him is coming out this week, and unfortunately he's not being showed here in Guam. And so he, the movie title says the whole thing, and those who know about him, he's an abortionist, operated out of Philadelphia. Some of them were botched abortions. Infants came out alive, and they just threw it in the sink. It was just a horrific thing. And this is legalized abortion. This is what we're trying to fight against. And I don't understand the position that says, it's a private issue. It's a private issue. How about we apply that to other applications? I don't own slaves. Does that mean that I don't get involved with the slavery issue and say that I'm against it? It just doesn't wash when we speak about, the innocent, the most vulnerable. And we need to, our dialogues have also changed, because we don't say that, it's the unborn. We talk about the child in the womb, because that's the only key difference between a child that is outside the womb and a child that's inside the womb. And, it's just, and PNC, of all newscasts, if you don't remember, there was a baby that was found at a doorstep. And PNC ran an article that, they focused on the baby that was found at a doorstep out here in Davis somewhere. And then they said, in a companion piece, abortion clinics are shut down.
That was awful, wasn't it?
How is that a companion piece?
Yeah.
In what literary form is that a companion piece? And so this is their true colors are coming out. Their true colors are coming out. That they do favor abortion. They're not about finding middle ground. They're trying to cut the noise off. They're trying to cut the feed from other pro-lifers and those who are anti-abortion, who see the intrinsic evil that abortion does to society. And it just amazes me that just because she says she's a nurse, well, Kermit Gosnell was a doctor. Kermit Gosnell and the horrors that he did. Just because you got a title as a nurse, or just because you got a title as a doctor, does not make you above reproach. And it certainly doesn't make you above being wrong. It's just a title that was conveyed to you at some point of your professional life.
And it doesn't give you the ability to rule on what is actually a moral issue, Jack.
That's true. That's true. And this is the problem that we have. A liberal society has turned away from core values because they know it's a losing argument. So they try to focus on peripherals, such as what are we going to do to do about health care? And they changed names for abortion to women's reproductive rights or women's health care or something like that. They use code words to try to undermine the seriousness of the discussions that you're trying to have. And so this has been divided. Even, I don't know, since I was, 73. I was just a young kid. This stuff is very divisive. And until we approach it and see it for what it is and how it decimates society and the history behind abortion, it has to be at the forefront, and they just want to bury it. And I'm glad that whether they're doing it out of virtue or because they're doing it as a political ploy, abortion has to be at the head front. It has to be an issue that's out there, and you can't hide from it.
Hey, Jack.
Yes.
As usual, a really good call. I'm right up against the last call.
Okay, Bob. I'm listening to you on the way home.
I'm really glad you called. Good points, Jack.
Okay.
What would you do with unlimited internet? With Docomo Pacific, the possibilities are endless. Docomo Pacific is throwing off the data caps so you can enjoy more of the things you love. Watch, stream, download, and play with no end in sight. Stop by any of our stores or check out DocomoPacific.com to learn more. Life becomes limitless with Docomo Pacific. Better together.
So a very interesting call from a Tall Tales Nation longtime citizen, Jack, who has the distinction of a couple of times showing me that I didn't know Jack about what I was talking about, something that I usually can't say about him. He usually knows what he's talking about, and I thought that he was right on with respect to his commentary on the different views of abortion, and he picked up on something that I talked a little bit about yesterday. You know, nobody wants to use the A word. Certainly Lou Leanne Guerrero is not going to want to use the A word. She wants to talk about, what was it, women's reproductive health or women's rights or something like that. And even the anti-abortion folks sometimes aren't that comfortable with it. But what it is, it's called abortion. And I'm glad that the issue is finally getting some legs here in the home stretch of this campaign. And it's the kind of an issue that must be talked about. And I also have to take a moment here to talk about some of the legal positions that I think are important on this matter, and that is that I am a federalist. That is, I believe in the federal system that we don't have anymore. We have a national government instead of a federal government. But in the beginning, states were the primary regulators of individual conduct of their own residents and citizens. Up until around the turn of the last century, there wasn't even a federal penitentiary because there were so few federal crimes that there was no need for a federal penitentiary. At the time that John Kennedy was assassinated, there was no federal law against murder. And these are not oversights by the U.S. Congress. It just goes to show the design of the system, and that is that most individual conduct was the subject of state law. And various states had different laws regulating abortion. Okay, I don't see a name, Real Joe. Okay, well, I'll just pick it up and see who it is. Hello.
Hi, Bob.
Hi.
This is Mary.
Hi, Mary.
I just wanted to, first of all, I want to thank you for bringing up the issue of abortion into your talk show. And I heard about it and made sure tonight that I was able to listen to it. And I was glad for Tim's input because this is not strictly about abortion, meaning Lou Leanne Guerrero's testimony. It's about an infant that survives an abortion attempt and what to do. And Lulu is just very dismissive, let the child die. Don't bother because the doctor knows better. And so I thought I was feeling so strongly about it this last week and a half, so that I decided that to take a step forward, and I'm inviting anyone and everyone who's willing to show that we don't want a governor, man or woman, who shows such disrespect for human life. And one way of letting that person know is to actually protest publicly on public streets. And I plan to, a few of us or some of us, I don't really know how many, on Friday, the day after tomorrow, to protest publicly in the streets against her and her desire to lead the island of Guam, a woman and a former nurse, to have the audacity to say that she knows what's best for Guam when she disrespects the life of the child that suffers, that has been able to survive an abortion attempt. And I'm inviting everybody and anyone who's willing to join me on Friday along the streets, the public streets, along the main branch in Agana, the Bank of Guam. And that's all I have to say.
You didn't mention when you're going to do this, Mary.
Friday.
Oh.
Friday after tomorrow. Oh, from 11 o'clock, and anybody can, 11 to 1, and if people come late and they want to continue it on, that's fine. I have limited time to be available during the day, but between 11 to 1, there'll be some of us here are willing to let our cause be seen, not just heard, but also be seen along the streets.
Okay, Mary. Well, thanks for calling.
Can I just ask, aside from staying on the public sidewalks, is there any other thing we should be? Do we have to inform anybody that we're doing this? Do we have to go get a permit or anything like that?
Well, I think as long as you keep a reasonable interval between the people and keep moving, you're probably just using the sidewalk. That'd be my horseback opinion.
Okay. Well, thank you for your time.
Okay, Mary.
Keep up the good work.
Thank you. So long.
You're welcome.
Okay, well, the battle is indeed joined. Be interesting to see how that one comes out. So I was talking a little bit about federalism and abortion, and the fact that the original design of the country was that it was a matter of state interest to regulate conduct of state citizens and residents, and probably most states had laws against abortion, but there was nothing that would require a state to criminalize abortion if that's what the people wanted. That's the beauty of our federal system. But when Roe versus Wade came along in 1973, 7 guys on the Supreme Court figured out how they could amend the Constitution, find the right of privacy in that Constitution, and because of a woman's right to privacy, say that no state, any state that had that attempted to criminalize abortion, was acting in an unconstitutional fashion, and that's where it all began. And I would say that as a general proposition, a legislative solution is usually better than a judicial solution, because the legislative branch is the popular branch. That's how the people speak, if they're going to speak. When it's the Supreme Court, it is the non-democratic branch of our government. You don't have any chance whatsoever to persuade a Supreme Court justice as to how you think a matter should come out. So on matters of criminal law, abortion, social policy, I think that the Democratic part of the government, the Congress or state legislatures, is far superior to the Supreme Court. And then when it comes to amending the Constitution, which is what the Roe Supreme Court actually did, there's a pretty involved procedure for amending the U.S. Constitution. You have to have, 2/3 of the state of each of the houses have to approve the amendment, and then it goes out to the states, and 3/4 of the states have to approve the amendment. It's pretty hard to come by. But in Roe versus Wade, we found that seven politicians in black robes could do it all by themselves. And one thing that Lou said, the argument will never end, and I think she's right on that, because the Supreme Court stuffed it down everybody's throats. I think even the legendary Ruth Bader Ginsburg has come along and said something very similar to that. So we'll probably pick this up tomorrow, and I got to go back to Pocahontas versus Trump one more time. Ken and Tom versus the GEC. Elizabeth Barrett Anderson versus tourist class on an airplane. Doris versus Mike with a amicus brief by Elizabeth Warren, perhaps. And Hills versus Weir. So we'll have the usual really interesting, exciting Tall Tales tomorrow. Try not to miss it. See you then.